My name is Molly Harnish, and I'm a rising senior majoring in economics. This summer, Oscar's URSP program allowed me to lay the foundation for my undergraduate thesis.
My project is titled, Who Owns the Forests? The relationship between natural resource ownership and use is complex, especially for forests. Research has shown that forest cover, merchantability, timber price responsiveness, and land use decisions vary with ownership type and context.
Preservation 2000, Florida's conservation funding program that ran from 1991 to 2000, offers a unique opportunity to examine the effects of changes in public ownership on the forest products industry.
As you can see here, the Florida Preservation 2000 Act was intended to be an aggressive program of public land acquisition. It set aside $3 billion over 10 years between 1991 and 2000 to fund public conservation land acquisition, 2.9% of which was allocated to the Florida Forest Service.
After the passage of the act, the share of state-owned timberland, forest land that can be used for timber, in Florida increased dramatically relative to that of its neighbors in the southeast. This increase in funding may have created a market for conservation. Timberland owners who were looking to divest knew that an additional buyer, the state, now had the resources and the intention to purchase land. Meanwhile, conservation organizations may have acted as middlemen, purchasing land and then selling it to the state for the state to manage.
In addition to the research on forest ownership and land use already mentioned, previous research has analyzed the forest products industry's economic contribution for the United States and Florida. Others have examined public conservation land acquisition and its effects at both the national level and in Florida. However, the relationship between conservation policy, changes in ownership, and the forest products industry, particularly that resulting from Florida's funding for land acquisition, has not yet been investigated.
Therefore, my research question is, what is the relationship between funding for public conservation land acquisition, timberland ownership, and wages, employment, and establishments in Florida's forest products industry? I combined quarterly data on employment, wages, and establishments from the Bureau of Labor Statistics Quarterly Census of Employment and Wages, acreage and growing stock of timberland from the U.S. Forest Service, information on acquisitions made with Preservation 2000 funding from the Florida Natural Areas Inventory and Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and data on timber products output, again from the U.S. Forest Service. The following three figures show timberland acreage under different types of ownership in the Southeast before and after Preservation 2000. Florida's ownership is represented by a red bar. As you can see from this figure, forest industry holdings declined in all states, especially in Florida and Georgia. Meanwhile, public ownership, which includes federal, county, and municipal ownership in addition to the state ownership shown earlier, rose in all states, and in Florida it nearly doubled.
Finally, notice two things on this figure. First, before 1991, Florida's non-industrial private timberland ownership, which includes farmers, individuals, and corporations that are not forest industry, was the lowest in the Southeast, but by the mid-2000s it had increased to meet some of its fellow states. Second, note that non-industrial private ownership increased most drastically in Florida and Georgia, while remaining roughly the same or increasing slightly in the rest of the Southeast. This increase in non-industrial private ownership was largely a result of increased ownership by corporations that were not forest industry, that is, not owned by a company or individual operating a wood processing plant. Some of this land was sold by forest industry to real estate investment trusts and timber investment management organizations. This change in private ownership might also explain some of the changes in the forest products industry, since timberland investors manage land differently from forest industry landowners. To analyze the forest products industry, I collected economic indicators for forestry and logging, wood product manufacturing, and paper manufacturing. Interestingly, Florida's wages, establishments, and employment for these three subsectors do not appear to deviate significantly from those in the rest of the Southeast. The following four figures each show a different economic indicator: total quarterly wages, average weekly wages, establishments, and employment, split by subsector. Forestry and logging is on top, wood product manufacturing is in the middle, and paper manufacturing is on the bottom. Florida remains around the middle of the pack for total quarterly wages, except in paper manufacturing. Again, around the middle of the pack in average weekly wages in all three subsectors. Around the middle for employment, except in paper manufacturing, where it's at the bottom. And around the middle in terms of establishments, except for forestry and logging, where it is again at the bottom. My next steps will be to analyze this dataset using a difference in difference analysis, comparing Florida's forest products industry before and after Preservation 2000 to that of the rest of the states in the Southeast. By doing so, I hope to add to the conversation about the relationship between policy, ownership, and natural resource outcomes.